Alright guys, so today I figured we would work on the sprocket and maybe a sprocket tensioner on the lifted mudding mower. As you can see, I've got the rear wheels removed and the back is actually lifted off the ground using a winch attached to the ceiling of my garage, as you can see there. And I've got everything pulled apart more or less. There wasn't really much to take apart. I got to take the brakes off still, slide the rear axle out. You can see down here I've already got the drive sprocket in place on the Peerless transmission. That is an 8-tooth sprocket. I'm not really sure the gear ratio is inside here. It's only a 3-speed, but it's a 40 or 41 pitch sprocket. Shouldn't really matter though because I use 40 pitch chain and that fits both. Over here you can see I've started to gather some parts. I actually purchased some the other day. This is a 48-tooth sprocket, 40 pitch. This is going to be the axle sprocket. This is the corresponding hub that just goes in there and we have to weld that up. I got another 10 feet of 40 pitch roller chain, and this is all brand new. I have some scrap pieces here from the racing mower which I will actually probably use for the mudding mower and put a new piece on the racing mower, because you guys saw my last video where I blew the chain right out the back and it was probably due to the master link. So I took the advice of a YouTube user named 68 Peeler and bought myself a chain brake, and I got this one from Tractor Supply. It's very bizarre. It grabs onto the chain like sideways, kind of like this, and then you'd spin this part here and it drives a pin out which releases your chain, breaks your chain I guess. And actually I'll be doing that on the racing mower as well, not necessarily today, but I'm going to be getting rid of the master link on this thing because I don't want the chain turning into a rat's nest underneath my ass at 50 miles an hour and then having that rear end lock up or something really dangerous like that. So we're going to get rid of the master link in there. So thank you to 68 Peeler for the comment and the advice. We're going to go with that, and hopefully it works out. So enough friggin' chit chat, let's get back to work. I got to take this sprocket and weld it to this hub, and this is going to take a little while because I only have a little 110 volt Lincoln Electric wire feed welder, and this is some pretty thick steel, so I'm not going to make you guys watch all of this. But once I get that done and out of the way, I got to remove the brake parts, the axle and everything from the frame of the lifted mudding mower and get that all out of the way. And this is what we are left with. Pretty much nothing but a set of bearings and a brake caliper bracket. And I think I am actually going to reinforce this brake caliper bracket by running a piece of steel up there just to triangulate that to make it a little stronger. But other than that, I'm going to get that sprocket cleaned up. And we're going to put this axle back in and start lining up some chain. Axle is in and centered. Sprocket is on, but it's not lined up. It's close. So I ran into the house real quick and grabbed some extra parts. I got these 2-piece locking collars, and these are necessary to keep your axle from sliding left to right. I got this. It's a poly nylon tensioner, like a idler tensioner thing for chains or belts, but it's made for chains. I don't know if I'll need this, but I've got it. I got these 2 axle nuts which will help me bolt on my hubs, which are already out here. And I got my brake parts, and I got my lug nuts for my hubs, and I got my key stock. So first things first, locking collars, and I opted to put mine on the insides of the bearings. You can see one there and the other one there, and I usually opt for the 2-piece locking collars. You can see what I mean by 2-piece, and you can unscrew these Allen bolts completely out and put these on after the axle has been installed already, which is a huge advantage over the 1-piece locking collars, which you basically have to put on at the same time as you would your sprockets, so you really have to think ahead for those ones. Plus I think these do a better job of holding things in place than a single 1-piece. You can see this particular sprocket has set screws built into it to lock it down, but I really don't like to rely on these alone. It's always a good idea to add your locking rings in on either side to keep the sprocket from walking one way or the other. As you can see, I decided to put the brakes in. The hub is permanently set in with locking collars on both sides. Can't really see that one, but it's there. And the hub itself has a set screw in it, which you can see right there. Also make sure to put your keyway in on your brakes as well, or else you'll step on your brakes and nothing will happen, and that obviously won't be good. I lack the bolts that bolt the rotor to the hub, which kind of sucks. So I have to go buy 4 bolts. And I was also going to put on the rear outer hubs that bolt the tires and wheels on, but I actually just realized I lack 2 of my locking collars. For some reason I did not buy enough of them, so I'll have to buy them from the hardware store, which really sucks because they're like 4 times the price there. And wouldn't you know it, you guys, it's just my luck. I took the chain that I broke off of the racing lawnmower and I put it on here, and it almost fits. When I say almost, I missed it by like 3 links. So that really sucks. So maybe what I'm going to do is try to press the old broken pieces of chain off of this chain's length and press in a new piece of chain down here and see how that works. And there's the chain, all wrapped nicely with no master links. Now one problem is there is still quite a bit of slack here, and I can't make it any tighter because I can't take a whole link out. So I'm probably going to make some sort of chain tensioner out of this poly chain tensioner thing that we talked about earlier, and just make like a spring tensioner, put it on this back side, probably about halfway down here in the chain somewhere up above where it's kind of hidden, but you know, where it's actually going to do some good. Alright, so I took a trip to the hardware store and I got 4 nuts and bolts for my brake rotor, so that's all good to go now. Not sure how well it works. I know it works pretty good because I put my hubs on, because I got my new locking collars as well. You can see those bad boys on there. And to put my hubs on, I put my locking collars on, put my key stock on, slid my hubs on, and then tightened this axle nut against the locking collar. And I used the brakes to actually hold the axle in place while I twisted this bolt. It's a very, very large bolt. So I know the brakes have pretty good amount of clamping force because they allowed me to bolt that bolt completely down. So here's the epitome of ghetto manufacturing. This is my chain tensioner, and you can see it's 3/4 inch tube steel, square tube steel, and it's welded in almost a 45-degree angle, not quite. And this is another piece of round tube steel welded to the top with a cold rolled steel shaft sent through the middle of it. And it has a hex head bolt on each side. So that gives me 2 flat surfaces to weld something to, and that basically just creates my pivot point, as you can see. And I'm probably going to spring load this thing somehow. I'm not exactly sure where that spring's going yet, but I got to get this thing welded up into place, and we'll figure that out. So we've pretty much got it tack welded into place. You can see where I've got the pivot point welded up there next to the transmission mount and the pulley, and it's really close to everything, but it works. And down here you can see where it swings, and it's going to contact the chain just perfectly. So I am going to put a spring on this thing somewhere, but first I've got to finish welding all of that up. Well, that was pretty easy. As you can see right there, I drilled a hole in the top of my box tube steel and put a spring in, and that spring, or at least the other end of the spring, runs up to another hole I drilled here in the back, and you can see it just running basically laterally, front to back, pulling this tensioner into the chain. I tell you what, boys, it's pretty hard to move with my hand. I can't really demonstrate it for you with one hand, but I mean, that is pretty freaking tight. Here it is from another angle. Hangs down and across. That's where it contacts the chain, and that's where the spring goes back. I just sourced the spring from my gigantic box of springs. So yeah, thank you to the box of springs again. So with the rear axle installed, the rear hubs, the brakes, the chain tensioner, I think it's pretty safe to say it's time to put these wheels back on. There. Got a lot done. Chain tensioner, brakes, rear axle, tires are back on. Making good progress. So that's it for me, boys. Fire's going out, battery light's flashing, so it seems like a good time to stop while I still have that option. So yeah, I'm happy with the progress today. Hope you guys are too. Probably the next thing on the agenda will be cleaning out the gas tank, fixing the wiring, and getting all that squared away. And probably a test drive. So yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for the support. Hopefully you guys liked the video. And we will see you on the next mudding mower update.